Blacks had fought in the American Revolution, began to demand a little privileges based on that. Blacks had grown tired of going into white churches and sitting on the side or up in the buzzard's roof, and they had challenged whites, and after the challenge they found the independent black church, the African, the Methodist, the Episcopal Church. They didn't toy with this word Negro or colored. They didn't water it down with black. Black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are. I'm saying that at this point in our history, we were not only longing for Africa, we were having thoughts about return 100 years before Marcus Garvey was born. In the African Lodge, in the early African societies, the first Masonic order found by a man from Barbados, Prince Hall, the Odd Fellows, found by a man from Antigua, Peter Ogden. Now look what you got then that you don't have now. Caribbean people and African American people working hand and side by side. No one is calling each other any names. But they realized something then you don't realize now. That the slave ship brought no West Indians, brought no black Americans, brought no Jamaicans. And because they were all African people, they had a common interest as African people.
Peace and much love, family. I pray that this presentation finds you well. Here we want to discuss the foundational Black American fundamental problems when it comes to what they believe in, and we want to expose what many in the movement represent. Family, we have to have these discussions. And I also want to share my position and why I speak the way that I do and why I oppose many of what this group represents.
Why should the black man in America concern himself, since we've been away from the African continent for 400 years, 300 or 400 years? Why should we concern ourselves? What impact does what happened to them have upon us? Number one, first you have to realize that up until 1959, Africa was dominated by the colonial powers, and by the colonial powers of Europe having complete control over Africa, they projected the image of Africa negatively. They projected Africa always in a negative light. Jungles, savages, cannibals, nothing civilized. And naturally, it was so negative until it was negative to you and me. And you and I began to hate it. We didn't want anybody to tell us anything about Africa, and much less call us an African. And in hating Africa and hating the African, we ended up even hating ourselves without even realizing it. Because you can't hate the roots of a tree and not hate the tree. You can't hate your origin and not end up hating yourself. You can't hate Africa and not hate yourself. And you show me one of these people over here who have been thoroughly brainwashed, who has a negative attitude toward Africa, and I'll show you one that has a negative attitude toward himself. You can't have a negative attitude toward yourself, a positive attitude toward yourself, and a negative attitude toward Africa at the same time. To the same degree that your attitude, that your understanding of an attitude toward Africa becomes positive, you'll find that your understanding of and your attitude toward yourself will also become positive. And this is what the white man knows. One of the things that made the black Muslim movement grow was its emphasis upon things African. This was the secret to the growth of the black Muslim movement. African blood, African origin, African culture, African ties. And you'd be surprised. We discovered that deep within the subconscious of the black man in this country, he's still more African than he is American. He thinks that he's more American than African because the man is jiving him, and then the man is brainwashing him every day, telling him, you're an American, you're an American. Man, how could you think you're an American and you haven't ever had any kind of American treat over here? You have never. 10 men can be sitting at a table, eating, dining. And I can come and sit down where they're dining. They're dining. I got a plate in front of me, but nothing is on it. Because all of us are sitting at the same table, are all of us diners? I'm not a diner until you let me dine. Then I become a diner. Just being at the table with others who are dining doesn't make me a diner. And this is what you got to get in your head here in this country. Just because you're in this country doesn't make you an American. And no, you got to go farther than that before you can become an American. You got to enjoy the fruits of Americanism. And you haven't enjoyed those fruits. You've enjoyed the thorns. You've enjoyed the thistles, but you have not enjoyed the fruits. No, sir.
Brother John Henrik Clarke, our great ancestor, our teacher, and our honorable teacher, because Malcolm X, explained beautifully how black people didn't come over here as Americans, Haitians, Trinidadians, Jamaicans, Guyanese, Cuban, or Dominican. Our ancestors came here and was forced over here as Africans. Malcolm said you can't hate the root of the tree and not hate the tree. You can't hate your origins and not hate yourself. Deep within the subconscious of the black man, he is still more African than he's American. America is where he's from, his nationality. But like Peter Tosh said, you have the identity of an African. You're probably wondering why somebody like me is going after Tariq Nasheed and the foundational Black American movement as vehemently as I am. But I'm doing this because of this quote from the great ancestor Asajefo Kwame Nkrumah. I noticed that the FBA movement, the foundational Black American movement, loves to use the year 1526. They want to shy away from 1619. But let's go back to 1526. In 1526, enslaved Africans in the Spanish colony of San Miguel, modern-day Georgia or South Carolina, staged the first recorded slave rebellion in what had become the United States. They revolted, set fire to the colony, and escaped to live with local Native Americans, bypassing Spanish authority. Here are some key details from these events. Upon the arrival, Spanish explorer Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón brought approximately 600 settlers, including an unknown number of enslaved Africans, to the Georgia-South Carolina coast. The rebellion. Due to harsh conditions, sickness, and the death, the enslaved people rebelled, creating the first recorded uprising. The Africans escaped the settlement, fleeing into the interior to live with the local indigenous tribes, marking an early instance of resistance and maroonage. The significance? These events occurred nearly 100 years before the 1619 arrival of Africans in Jamestown, Virginia. The failed Spanish colony was abandoned shortly after rebellion, leaving the escaped Africans to integrate with the local indigenous populations. I want to say that again so it can sink in a little bit for these foundational Black Americans. The Spanish brought over enslaved Africans. Okay? They were not indigenous. the failed Spanish colony was abandoned shortly after the rebellion, leaving the escaped Africans. Leaving the escaped Africans. Leaving the escaped Africans to integrate with local indigenous populations. Escaped Africans integrated with local indigenous populations. So FBA Movement, Tariq, Nasheed, what about 1526 again? History records enslaved Africans, not a people who came over here without a culture, not a people who were indigenous hundreds of thousands of years in this land. These Africans, our ancestors, were not indigenous to America. We were not Native Americans. We were not Mesoamericans, Olmecs, whatever y'all want to look up. We were not indigenous to this country. They didn't come here on the Mayflower. As Brother Malcolm said, Plymouth Rock landed on us, African people. This was our ancestors. These ancestors, these African people who fought racism, slavery, and oppression and won in the year 1526, just 100 years prior to our widespread enslavement. How did they stop being African and become indigenous to America? I ask these questions because foundational Black American people, many of them don't read or seriously study and come off in debates and exchanges as very poorly educated. Very poorly educated. They just parrot what a large social media account commentator says. If the foundation of Black American followers and believers actually did the work to study, they wouldn't believe their own ideology. Why did the early African churches, the early Black churches, the early Negro churches, during and post-slavery, name their churches in this way? African Methodist Episcopal Church. By the early 19th century, African Americans, Africans in America, established independent Black churches and congregations, often led by freedmen. Keyword, often led by freedmen. Independent Black churches, such as the freedmen named it the African Methodist Episcopal Church, founded by Richard Allen in 1816. These churches became centers of resistance and community support, including being active in the Underground Railroad that freed so many Africans. The great Harriet Tubman never lost a mission, never lost a passenger, never lost an enslaved African on his path to freedom. And I want to give you more examples. These were some key early Black churches and denominations. The first African Baptist Church, Savannah, Georgia, circa 1773, often recognized as one of the oldest, founded by George Lely. Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 1794, founded by Richard Allen. This became the mother church of the AME denomination, established formally in 1816. Mother African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, New York City, 1796, known as the Freedom Church. It was chartered in 1799. The African Baptist Church, 1805, also known as the Joy Street Baptist Church. First African Baptist Church, Lexington, Kentucky, 1790, founded by Peter Durrett.
All these books need to be read. We as a people overhear conversations and sometimes with a cocktail in our hand, and we become authorities on what we heard, but we didn't read the book. Why don't you shock me by reading a whole book, every page of it, then quote correctly when you quote it?
What John Henrik Clarke said in that clip is more relevant today than when he said it in 1990. Read the whole book. As John Henrik Clarke said, Foundation of Black Americans, Tariq, Nasheed, you guys don't read the whole book. How did our ancestors how and why did our ancestors refer to themselves as African? Now we today are African American, Black American, foundational Black American, descendants of slaves. Black describes what you look like. It describes the hue of your skin, but it does not tell you who you are. Before the white man called us Negroes, and Brother Malcolm asked us, even in the 60s, a couple of fundamental questions.
Who are you? You don't know? Don't tell me Negro, that's nothing. What were you before the white man named you a Negro? And where were you? And what did you have? What was yours? What language did you speak then? What was your name? It couldn't have been Smith or Jones or Bunch or Powell. That wasn't your name. They don't have those kind of names where you and I came from. No, what was your name? And why don't you now know what your name was then? Where did it go? Where did you lose it? Who took it? And how did he take it? What tongue did you speak? How did the man take your tongue? Where is your history? How did the man wipe out your history? What did the man do to make you as dumb as you are right now?
Tariq Nasheed is a natural born hustler. Can we start with his name? Tariq Nasheed, the word Tariq. Yes, it is Arab or Arabic in origin, but it's tied to the Moorish movement. It was famously associated with Tariq Ziyad, 8th century Berber Muslim leader who led the Moorish conquest of Iberia with the Jabal Tariq, named after him. Tariq was a dark-skinned North African, by the way. How do I know Tariq Nasheed is a hustler? Is an entertainer. He said it himself in his previous works as a rapper. King Flex, the self-proclaimed master of macking, knowing how to pimp a woman. So when he realized that he could no longer pursue a career in rapping, Tariq became conscious brother. In the height of the Black consciousness movement in the late 2000s and early 2010s, Tariq produced a documentary at the height of the new black consciousness community. Don't y'all remember Brother Polite, General Seti, Dr. Umar Johnson? Now these are poor examples of leaders, but Tariq released a documentary called Hidden Colors in 2011. And look at the title. Hidden Colors, the untold history of people of Aboriginal, Moor, and African descent. The first installment in this series was released in April 14, 2011. The film, the very first film, discusses the role of African and Aboriginal people in history and argues some achievements have not been properly recorded or credited to them. The film also states Africans. The film also states Africans. The film, Hidden Colors, 2011, also states Africans were the first to circumnavigate the globe. There was pre-European settlement in the United States that Africans created the first dynasties. Tariq Nasheed is now telling his people to delineate from Africa. Making a documentary like that, now you're making a fundamental change to delineate. Tariq is a race hustler. Look at his past. Look at his past. He's excellent at hustling people. He is what Charles V. Hamilton described as an imposter. He is not a real political leader. And he does or isn't doing anything serious or meaningful in the community. We can't get fooled by large stream numbers and large Twitter space, large live stream YouTubes. He's being very misleading. You notice after the ADOS movement with Yvette Carnell, that was, I'm gonna give it to her. It was legitimately gaining steam in the community. And this was around 2019. What did Tariq do? He abandoned Pan-Africanism. He abandoned aspects that he believed in Pan-Africanism. And all of a sudden, it's time to delineate. It's time to isolate. It's time to pigeonhole yourself in this corner and say, I'm a foundational Black American. In the following years, foundational Black Americans, a term, and made it an online movement. But why the ideological switch? It really feels like it was for personal gain. Looking at his track record. Hop on what's trending. Hop on what's the next thing smoking. Like the Dr. Umar Johnsons, like the Brother Polites and others that prey on the Black community in America, when Black people in this country are looking for sincere and charismatic leadership from a political or cultural standpoint. They prey on this quote-unquote opportunity by promoting themselves as leaders, but they are exploiting Black suffrage, Black people's emotions, and Black people's desires to advance here in America. When you really study him, I've attended many of his Twitter spaces and his YouTube streams to learn more about the movement, to study it, to see what it's really about. He's not a political or social leader. He has what seems to be a very immature personality. He is a divider. He is an entertainer. He's a jokester. He refers to Black immigrants in the most disrespectful way possible. He frequently calls Africans, and especially those that disagree with him, as bushmeat eaters. Bushmeat. He will use and has used all the negative stereotypes that white racist people use to dehumanize us, that dehumanized foundational Black Americans. I'm just going to show a few examples. Is this your king? As Killmonger said, this is who you look up to? This is who you would take serious advice from on your social, political, and economic status in this world? Tariq Nasheed is literally this black-faced attack dog for white supremacy. Look at all this hate he is spewing. Calling people dirtfoot, hungry, musty, negus, bushmeat. Really? If you look at any quote-unquote foundational Black American leader, your Martin Luther Kings, your Ida B. Wells, your Frederick Douglasses, your Martin Delaney's, would any of those incredible leaders engage in conversations like this? Would they be dealing with Africans on the continent like this? Africans on the Caribbean like this? You got to ask yourself these serious questions. I noticed that Tariq Nasheed and his followers love to use the word tether or tether babble. But I looked up what it means to tether someone. To tether someone means to tie and restrain them, limiting their movement or freedom, often with a rope or a cord. But it can also be used metaphorically to mean being bound by responsibilities and emotions. It implies a strong connection or attachment that restricts independence, whether physically or figuratively. What does that sound like? What is Tariq Nasheed doing in his rhetoric and his dialogue? Tariq and the people that follow him are restricted to their ideology. They delineate themselves from their global history, their true heritage. They restrict themselves of learning from other philosophies of Africans from around the world. He tethers or restricts himself from, and his followers, from seeing the bigger picture of our global struggle and experience that is caused by the same enemy. What the FBA, Foundation of Black Americans, have created is this superiority complex of a racist white man or woman that makes them feel like Black Americans are superior to other African and Caribbean ethnic groups. And the foundational Black Americans are fighting for reparations. Do you think you foundational Black Americans are going to be able to delineate and isolate yourselves and cut off any allies? Do you think you can successfully take your case to the criminal, which is the United States government? You think the criminal is going to indict itself on its own? No. It's going to take support, international pressure, and trusted allies. I think foundational Black Americans obviously are owed reparations, along with any Caribbean Africans and Africans in Europe. Any person of African descent that ancestors suffered under brutal oppression and and forced to work unpaid labor are owed reparations. My position. I come from the same school of thought of the great Malcolm X, the great Marcus Garvey, and the great Kwame Nkrumah. These are my lead examples, but I was influenced by many others, but these are the top 3. I don't have a problem with Africans in America that call themselves Black Americans, that they are proud of the contributions and achievements and struggles that we overcame in this nation called America. We overcame all odds. Africans that are proud of their distinct culture and ethnicity, whether you are a diasporic African or a continental African, I think that's wonderful. Black Americans should be proud. Jamaicans should be proud. Kenyans and Nigerians and Ghanaians, they should be proud. I'm not saying that Black Americans should not be proud of their distinct and unique heritage in this country. But we got to understand the root. I know what Martin Delaney did. I know what Ida B. Wells did. I know what Gloria Richards did. I know what Harriet Tubman and Mary Meacham and Martin Luther King did. I'm not discrediting no contributions from Africans in America, Black Americans. But family, we got to deal with facts. Delineating is not going to solve the problem. The problem I have with race hustlers like Tariq Nasheed that is following this Tucker Carlson rhetoric of hating immigrants. He is using the most hateful, vile adjectives like the old slave masters and colonizers use to dehumanize continental Africans, Caribbean Africans, Latin American Africans. Is he a part of that FBI program that is used to divide and sell out African people? My position is practical solidarity and unity of Black people globally. You can act locally and push your objectives locally where you are, right where you are. But I think to be successful, we must think globally. Look for allies that look like you and legitimately support you. We are literally all we got. A Black American named Martin Delaney and a Jamaican named Robert Campbell knew the mother source. Paul Kufi and Thomas Peters, they engaged in the early Back to Africa movements. President Lincoln tried to send us to Haiti and Guyana and Liberia. I'm not calling for Black people in the diaspora to pick up and move to Africa. I support the immigrating to Africa. I support a power base being built there. I support dual citizenship. Practical unity benefits both sides. Seeing each other as a shared history, a shared struggle, and a shared experience with similar customs. Black people around the world know what it's like to live in a Western-dominated imperialist world, no matter what soil or continent they own. We feel it. We share it. We experience it. We should visit the mother continent if we can and build those bridges. I went to college with continental Africans and Caribbean Africans right here in America. And we all saw each other as black people. All of us showed love towards each other and exchanged cultural exchanges. I had 2 family members go to South Africa. I had some other friends go to Ghana and other parts of Africa, Kenya, Tanzania. And each one of them said it was a spiritual experience. We saw the I Show Speed tour. There are so many diasporic leaders that talked about their positive experiences on the mother continent. Celebrities and just common people have had incredible experiences there. I'm not saying everything is perfect in Africa, but delineating from our fellow diasporic Africans will not solve our problem. Fragmenting ourselves, isolating ourselves, delineating ourselves, pigeonholing ourselves, restricting ourselves, shunning ourselves from the global African community will not solve our problems. Unity, practical unity, solidarity on things that matter to us the most is what's going to get us there, family. We don't have to always agree. We don't have to be monolithic. But when our interests are at stake in terms of survival and thriving, it's going to require practical unity and practical solidarity that our ancestors have done throughout history. There's so many examples and evidence of it. But as the great John Henrik Clarke said, we have to read and study and not parrot what somebody else says on social media and says on a live stream. If European nations can fight each other all the time, but find a way to unite and have a Berlin Conference of 1884, that should tell us something. The Berlin Conference of 1884, also known as the Congo Conference, was a major diplomatic meeting that formalized the scramble for Africa by establishing rules for European colonization and trade on the continent. Organized by German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck at the request of Portugal, the conference brought together representatives from 14 nations, including Britain, France, Germany, Portugal, and Belgium, to carve up African territory without the presence or consent of any African leader. You should understand that, family, and study that. We saw that J. Edgar Hoover, in this FBI memo to 41 field offices, said that black people in the United States, he was very fearful of, especially those that were influential in a political and economic sphere. He said, prevent the unity of black militant organizations. Prevent the rise of a messiah-like figure that can unify the movement, and they needed to stop the long-range program of future movements and keep those organizations who are quote-unquote militant to be isolated and discredited and separated from the moderate community. We saw how the United States responded to Haiti and Grenada as examples of diasporic unity. We saw how the Western power structure responded to the Organization of African Unity when they were trying to unite the continent and the diaspora. If global Western unity and solidarity is what was used to suppress and oppress and exploit us, It's going to take global black solidarity, not delineation, not isolation. It's going to take black solidarity globally and frameworks of Pan-Africanism coming together on key issues that matter to all black people the most, to completely liberate us and have full independence in our pursuit of liberty and happiness. We've got to come together, family, for the big struggle that lies ahead. Peace and love.
New bridges must be built because in the minds of the majority of our people today, Africa is too far away. So the only way you and I can point them in that direction is build new bridges. We have to have the type of understanding of Africa and the type of understanding of our people here in order to build a bridge, a contact, a line of communication between the two. And once the lines of communication have been established and our African brothers can stretch forth their hands and reach us, and we can stretch forth our hands and reach them, why there's nothing that this blue-eyed man in this country will be able to do to you and me successfully from that day on.